I'm going to shortly introduce each speaker. The sessions are slightly different lengths, so let's hope we can fit them all in. Our first speaker is Burgess from the Glasgow School of Art. And he's going to sing as a repository song, which is called Radar.
It's the second iteration. As you might be aware, I presented in 2011 as part of the Repository Fringe Festival, and I was presenting my paper to do with the take-up embedding and embedding strand from the GIST-funded project, where Glasgow School of Art were just embarking on developing their new repository and learning to embed their previous system into a better system for managing our research outputs. At that time, I sang a song which was basically introducing the story so far of where we were with the project, and the conclusion of that song was that we'd finally thought of a name for our repository, that of Radar. 2 years down the line, I'm here again. I was pleased to come back. Once again, as last time, this is only the second time I'll have performed in front of this number of people, so once again, I'm a bit nervous and I'll probably go a bit shaky when I attempt to do the song. But the song is primarily kind of giving an update of where we're at with the system at the moment, what's happened with it, functionality, what help we've had, and kind of some impact and recommendations. I've produced a short video kind of backdrop, which I probably won't be able to keep in time with, and hopefully it'll play. They say never work with people and animals. My cat was trying to get in on the video while I was doing it until 12 o'clock last night, so if you hear there might be some meowing, but I think I've got the sound muted because I did try to shut him out from the room. So basically, the song is called Radar, our research repository. I just have to try and get comfortable with the guitar, and then I'll give it a go. I'll just go for it. Oops, is that going to work? Please. Welcome to Radar, our new repository. It's an improvement on FileMaker with better functionality. We built it using ePrints, an established company. They really have helped us increase its usability. The video appears to have frozen, so I'll just carry on. Right, just try that. Maybe it will go again, but if not, I'll just go right. Okay, staff are now able to access the repository from their home computers thanks to web-based technology. This was a function that staff previously were unable to do, so of course now they are happy. There was a really good slide at that point. Another important aspect of the new repository is that of increased awareness of GSA's research capability. Screen Media supported this process, a local web service company. They redesigned staff profiles and the template for the repository, meow. Through liaison with ePrints and the better use of technology, GSA have been able to embed Radar within the ethos of the research community. The impacts we've been seeing, I'd say, relate mainly to improved take-up and use by staff and better referable outputs, hopefully. With regard to recommendations, I would say simply make sure you engage with staff and resources and work with their needs and systems fully. And so in conclusion, Radar is our new repository, and I'd like to say a really big thank you to all of you for welcoming us to the repository community. The album will be coming out shortly. I've got a song on research data management as well, so it's coming together slowly.
Okay, so, well, you can ask any questions to Robin later over a drink. We'll have our next speaker, Robin Rice, with also a short presentation. Robin is data librarian here at the university, and do we need to plug you in?
No, I've just got my notes there to
Okay.
help me keep it short.
You know where it is, yeah?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so this is just the regular mic, and this is for, okay. It's the one that starts with rice. Forgot where the slideshow is. There it is. Pressure. Hello. So I'm one of the many University of Edinburgh people here. I'm just going to. I know that some people are interested in Edinburgh DataShare as an institution-style data repository, and so I just thought I'd share with you some of our kind of warts and all issues that are going on right now. To give you some things to think about if you're thinking about putting research data in your institutional repositories. So Edinburgh DataShare is a free at point of use data repository. We actually set it up around 2008 as part of a JISC repository enhancement program project back when no one was thinking about data and nobody really cared. So there was no community to compare notes with. We just did it, but we did get together 3 institutions that had either data librarians or kind of social science librarians that worked closely with the kind of users that we data librarians did, and also repository managers. So we worked with Oxford and Southampton, and we had exemplars for data repositories in ePrints, Fedora, and DSpace. And Oxford and Southampton have gone on to do other data-related projects and done other things, and we've kind of stuck with our DSpace data repository. Although we've also gone on, oops, I'm turning my notes page and not your page. So we've also gone on to do things like implement a research data management policy at the university. And so this is one of the points in the policy that kind of shows the importance of that the data repository has taken on since we had a policy. It means that people should deposit their data. Ideally, we don't actually use the term open access, unfortunately, but this is kind of gets across that idea that people should make their data publicly available, either in the institutional repository or in an appropriate domain repository. We're not very picky about where they put it, but we're trying to encourage sharing. So we got the policy in 2011, now we have a steering group. So we have some governance, which we didn't have before, to help us figure out what we should be doing and make it fit for purpose for academics. I'm sure Patrick will be glad to hear. Although I don't know if the rest of my slides we'll be happy about, but we'll see. But so this is a picture of the roadmap, which this talk is not about, but it's just sort of because it's now it's become the brickwork for everything we do. I had to put the picture in there. The repository has to do with the data stewardship part of the roadmap, and by the way, we're working with Sarah under data management planning to use the DMP Online tool, is my question earlier. So this governance group has set us a challenge, as they have with some other aspects, some other parts of information services for other services, to give us some kind of tough test cases for the repository. So that's basically what I'm talking about. So they came to us in different ways, but this was actually someone who came to us not through the steering group, but they were users of Mantra, our online training course, and they wanted to implement the good practice with their doctorate program in clinical psychology, and try and get their students to share their data. But that's been a bit tough going, because the students do clinical work in the NHS environment, and so sharing the data has been, a bit of an issue there. They've got NHS supervisors as well as university supervisors, and a lot of the field work is considered sensitive. And when I say that, I don't mean the legal sense, the Data Protection Act sense of personal and sensitive data, because it would be anonymized, anything that they would deposit. But what I mean is sensitive in terms of the NHS people might not want a certain study getting out there into the public, because it might lead to a scandal for the NHS. So while he grapples with the politics, we at least were able to use him as a good usability use case, because he wanted the instructions on the deposit to be as simple as possible so that all the students could do it, and that it would be unambiguous. And it was quite illuminating sitting down with him and going through every single step of the deposit process as to how what we were asking for metadata wasn't clear. So we've got a lot of usability results out of it, and we're got another next 2 releases are going to be fixing that, such as hiding required fields, making them collapse, only expanding them if you want to fill them out. Is that good, Patrick? I hope that's one step in the right direction. This next user was a perfect user in the sense that he was very happy at the end, but that's partly because we kind of did an assisted deposit for him. The first thing he did was upload a zip file, which he didn't even realize exceeded the limits of the zip format, so it didn't have all his data in it. But his expectation was that he could upload the zip file and we would unpack it and magically explain all the files inside it. So, so to get around that, we uploaded the files for him. So he was happy, but that remains the ideal that we would like to be able to give users, to make it that simple. There's some other issues that came up around this was that he had already deposited the data in a Max Planck specialist, kind of lost languages type repository. And so what really was the purpose of him depositing in DataShare? I don't really know, but he was sent to us by the steering committee. I guess he likes the fact that it's getting more access. He liked the ability to look at the download statistics, and he's referring colleagues to us. So I don't know what people feel about duplication, if that's a bad thing or not. But and then we have people from informatics, which are challenging because they're doing computing stuff, and the data is the means to the end. They're interested in the code. One of them was this center, which is partly based in, I think, linguistics and partly based in informatics. And what they do is they watch meetings happen, and then they annotate they take videos, and then they annotate the videos as to what kind of interactions are going on in the meetings and things like that. So they've got these very large video files, and they've got specialist software that they've invented. So we've talked about depositing software as a virtual machine image. We're still at the talking stage with them, appropriately enough for this collection being called the Listening Talker. But so there is an ongoing deposit going on with them, but the PhD student they put in charge keeps going back to the PIs over every decision, so it hasn't actually gone in yet. The things that they want is user registration. It's the things that they've got for the data that they have on their web page. So user registration, they embed their own licenses in the headers of the files, which they came up with that system like 10 years ago. So they're not necessarily wanting to move to an open data commons license as we try and encourage users to do. So it's got special terms and conditions. How do we make the users aware of that? If we give them user registration, which is not required for any particular reason in terms of the collection of the data or any kind of rules that they're obliged to do, and you could just fill out a fake email address and get the data. But we're just worried that if we give that to them, won't everyone want it? And then it's no longer an open repository. There's been some debate on some lists about whether that's even a violation of academic freedom, making people say who they are and why they're going to use the data before they download it. So we're being a little bit cautious about that. The next use case is it's the second time you've seen the Roslyn logo stolen and used on the slide. We've been working with Colin Simpson, who's attending as the data manager, and so he's kind of our proxy for the user community at Roslyn. And basically, they got lots of the omics data, which is not our background with data library in terms of knowing about it. We had the impression that maybe some of you in the audience have, is that there's specialist repositories for this stuff. There's databases where all this stuff goes to. It's apparently not entirely true. There's some databases out there like that, but they're generating a lot of, they're doing sequencing, as you saw in the machine earlier, the machine registration. And it's very big files, getting bigger, getting easier to generate, which has storage concerns. So should the repository be the answer for their storage concerns, as long as they're willing to share it openly? Should that burden be on us to always be adding more and more terabytes, or should they be going it alone to figure out their storage solutions? That's an open conversation we're having. They're also interested in a lot of push-pull, for value-added things out of the repository, populating their web pages from the information, and wanting to enter the data only once in the CRIS, and then we get all the project-related information from there to pre-fill some of the fields. So we've got a lot to learn working with them. And then the last one, maybe, hopefully, is the Fish for Knowledge project, which is quite a challenge. They've got an EU project of fish swimming in the ocean in Taiwan, and they're working with a data center there. But the big issue is sustainability. When the project ends, they think the data center will just kind of scrub the disk and get it ready for the next project, rather than, and it's observational data. It's fish swimming in the sea. That could change with climate change, et cetera. So, and what the informatics people added to that, this PI wasn't a marine biologist, but he came up with the technique to identify the species of fish through automatically with the video. So there's a bit of a database SQL line of information along with this little clip of image. So he was suggesting we just take a 5% sample. That reduces some of the storage issues. That's still going to be 3 terabytes. And we just want to test it first, because we don't know what effect that will have on the rest of the repository. If each item has, if each frame has to be, each little video clip has to be its own data set or item in DSpace, that'll kind of swamp the search results of our metadata fields. And how do we paginate all those items, tens of thousands of items in a collection? So it's a very good use case for us for big data. And then we have Edinburgh College of Art, which I just won't say very much about because we're just kind of talking about it in theory at the moment rather than working with a particular deposit or collection. But as you may know, it's become part of the University of Edinburgh recently. They have their own digital asset management needs. They've got, as you can imagine, all this rich media that they need to figure out how to manage. They're trying to figure out to what extent is the repository a solution for them. So we've got, to what extent should we be giving rich display to the users, or is that the responsibility of another service? Yeah, and I'm out of time, so I will just leave this summary of what I already said, hopefully. The reason SIPs, AIPs, and DIPs are on there is just that issue of, at the moment, people are putting in, we're asking people to think about what format they put in to future-proof it, and the SIP, AIP, and DIP, if you're familiar with OAS, doesn't matter, are the same. But the College of Art raises the issue of, should the dissemination package be the same as the archival package? So never mind about that. I didn't have time to talk about digital preservation anyway. So thanks.
Thank you. Thanks very much. One quick question, if anyone has a quick question.
It strikes me that many of the examples that you've described there are very specific. They have very specific needs. Wrong one.
No, sorry.
Oh, and at the same time, one of the things that comes across to me when it comes to managing data is that we need to have more use cases described so that we have examples from which we can all learn across the sector. And I was wondering to what extent you would be in a position to be able to write up or describe those use cases or the examples that you have for wider awareness. Conscious that you're doing it now, but of writing them up so that we have a sort of start to build up a sort of library across the sector of use cases of how to manage different types of data in different circumstances.
I guess that's a good idea. I know the sort of higher ups are looking for use cases just as a way of talking to researchers in their own language about what we're trying to do and rolling out the services. I guess I'd like to solve all the problems before I write it up, publish it, but I'll keep that in mind.
But equally, yeah, it's something because I work very closely with Robin. We're trying to tackle them as well, and we keep thinking surely someone else has done this. So yeah, if there is a way of collecting these centrally, that would be fantastic. Yeah.
Thanks for not asking hard questions.
Okay, so the last speaker of the day, Stuart from University of Edinburgh, and I'll just.
So somehow I managed to start, and I'll end. Yeah, you'll notice I look a little different. I've rolled my sleeves up, so it's slightly techier, dirtier talk, this one. But we have 8 minutes left, so I'm just, if that's okay with you, just going to skip the first half of the presentation. I won't bother giving it to you. And I'll hopefully prove this. How many of you know about SWORD? Put your hand up. Okay, so we can probably skip that out. ResourceSync. Not so many. Okay, so we'll skip the SWORD bit. We come back to it at the end for a reason, but I'll sort of tell you why that is. So ResourceSync, I'll just talk about this really as an introduction. It's JISC has been playing a part in the development of the ResourceSync protocol. It's very applicable to repositories, so we thought it would be useful just to give you literally a 5-minute overview of it and sort of why it's important, because it's probably something you'll start hearing about a little bit more, I'll come stand over here, with repositories over the next few years. So ResourceSync is being developed by the same guys that developed OAI PMH. This time they're working with NISO as well and have Sloan funding. So really they're looking at a problem a bit like OAI PMH, which is how do we harvest everything out of our repositories, but sort of in a sense learning some of the lessons from OAI PMH and doing things a little bit differently. So first of all, it's looking at a much bigger generic web problem. Rather than just how do we synchronize metadata, well, why don't we ask a bigger question? How do we synchronize resources? Because ultimately, metadata is just a type of resource. So it's a protocol designed for synchronizing web resources on the web, really, does what it says on the tin. So that could be metadata and files in a repository. It could be images from Flickr. It could be all sorts of things. As I said, it's applicable to repositories because it can be used as an OAI PMH replacement. As much as we love OAI PMH and as much as it's sort of embedded in our community as a way of sharing things, it does have its problems. If anyone's ever used it, you will have had frustrations with it. I mean, one of the classic ones, for example, is whilst it'll give you a bit of metadata, there's no surefire way of saying, well, actually, it relates to these files, because it's all about metadata, yet when we harvest things, really, we're not so much interested in the metadata. We want to know what it goes with, so it helps out with some of those things. So basically, it just allows us to look at a repository or other system and find out what files have changed, so that if we want to mirror that or work with the content, we can do so in an efficient way. So there's a lot of different use cases for this. You might want to archive a whole site, so you want to know all the resources of it and sort of archive them, and then rather than archiving the whole thing, you just want to know what's changed. It might be a blog, you just want to know the blog post, so you can archive those over time. As I said, it's an ISO and Open Archives Initiative project, been working together, and we've had some involvement through very generous JISC funding on this. So there have been 4 of us from the UK sort of involved in that. And one of the things really we've taken to this is actually making some implementations of this. So if we have time, I'll show you one very quickly, just to show actually, because it's all very well having a standard, but you need to implement it. If you don't implement it, you can't find out where those rough edges are. Does it work? Does it not? What are the problems? And what I want to say as well, ResourceSync, and this is exactly the same for Sword, it's a protocol, because some people get this muddled up with Sword. They think, oh, I can download it and use Sword. ResourceSync, like Sword, is a protocol. It means it's a way of effectively computers talking to each other. You can't just download it and use it. There's no such thing as a bit of software to do that. We have to build software to do that. In the same way as if you want to use HTTP, you have to have a web server and a web browser. If you want to use Sword or ResourceSync, you have to have a client and a server. There's several layers to this protocol. The first thing is you want to know if a repository or if any other site supports ResourceSync. Can you interact with it that way? So there's a discovery mechanism. Once you've discovered that it does, you want to know, well, how does it do it? Because there's different ways of sort of talking about ResourceSync. So you can then sort of go back and say, well, how do you support it? What do you do? What don't you do? You can do that. Then there's sort of really 3 ways of interacting with it. One is a baseline sync. In other words, I want to synchronize the whole site. I want to know everything that's in it and grab it all. So you can do that initially. Then after that, you don't want to have to do that every week. You just want to say, well, give me what's changed in the past week. So you have things called change lists, which are a way of just saying, give me what you got in the last week and harvesting those. And finally, dumps, probably better known as zip files, really. Let's say you want to harvest the archive repository. There are hundreds of thousands of items in that. Do you want to make hundreds and thousands of requests, getting back a little thing, a little thing, a little thing, or do you just want to say, oh, give us everything, and it goes and they deliver it in a lorry, a big zip file, and here it is, much more efficient. So really that's ResourceSync. That's what it does. It's very much for getting things out of repositories, for harvesting them. Now, who's heard of sitemaps, or better known as Google sitemaps? You may or may not have heard of them. Your repositories will support them. It's a protocol that was developed by Google and some of the other larger search engines. They basically said, you know what, normally we spider websites, we go to the home page, we follow the links, we follow the links, we follow the links. It can be a bit inefficient. Much better if a website wants to, if it can literally just give us a catalog, give us an index of all the resources, all the web pages. And so they came up with a protocol called sitemaps, so like a DSpace, ePrints and so forth. They all support sitemaps out of the box. Whether or not you know they're there, they are there. And the Google and so forth can literally come and download a list of all your web pages rather than having to manually crawl them. So the very nice thing about ResourceSync is rather than reinventing the wheel, we just extend an existing technology. So don't worry if you don't like reading this sort of stuff, but the first 2 lines there are the way sitemap works. It says, here's a URL, and here's when it was changed. So that's what Google wants to know. They want to know what is there for us to index, and is it new? All we do with ResourceSync is add a little bit more data. So in a case here, we can say, well, what type of change is it? So we say, well, this is an update, something has changed. It could be this is a new item, this is a deleted item. It's just a way of expressing what's happened. And finally, from an OAI PMH point of view, you want to be able to express relationships between things. So simply, this is a relationship that says that thing sort of up at the top is an XML file, it's a metadata. The bottom bit here is, well, actually, that metadata is describing a PDF. So you're just making a relationship between them. So to sum this up, because we've run out of time, if you take nothing away but you want to just know some of the buzzwords with repositories, Sword, is putting things into repositories. ResourceSync is discovering what's in a repository and what has changed and getting it out again. And if you want to look into it at all, Archive, for example, have now published a ResourceSync feed for Archive, which is fantastic, especially if you're like us with JISC funding, developing implementations you want to test against. So there is that. And do you want a 30-second demo or not? Yes. Okay. We will see if this works. I don't know. So one of the nice things about these implementations that JISC have funded is they're sort of implementations both of the repositories and of, in a sense, libraries to do this. So I'm only going to run literally 3 lines of code. I will show it to you. So this is the ResourceSync part. Literally, we're going to run this, which says, I want a change list, a ResourceSync change list, and we're pointing at the archive one, and I want to process it. So from a programmer's point of view, you don't have to worry about ResourceSync. You can write a couple of lines of code. And that just works, and what we can do if we run that is, so this now says in the last 24 hours there's been 1,693 changes in Archive. As you would imagine, it's a very big site. So we are now processing these, eating up their bandwidth and the University of Edinburgh's bandwidth, but we're whizzing through that. Then from a SWORD perspective, it's exactly the same. We can now take that as we download them and push them straight into a repository. So fingers crossed. Again, SWORD now, because we have these libraries funded by JISC, we can literally sort of use single commands. So in this case, it's like, well, I have an item. You know, if ResourceSync has said there's a new item now attached to this metadata, we just want to push it in, I can literally type a single bit of code. So this demo was probably written in about an hour at the weekend. So if we run the other half, we're now pushing this into the repository using SWORD. So this is, by the looks of it, a very large archive item that has a lot of pictures. So these are basically all archive entries going straight into the repository. And if we watch it, so this is the DSpace it's going into and the collection. Yeah, there's 234 items in there. There's now 241. This must be a big one. And this is basically just, in a sense, live before your eyes, mirroring archive into DSpace. So using SWORD and ResourceSync. So I don't know if you have any questions. Probably not. You'll want to drink.
When are DSpace and ePrint supported?
So DSpace now has a sort of first cut implementation of this just to see how it works, because one of the things we sort of, our part in the repository sync development again has been sort of partially represented repositories and say, well, what does a repository want to do? So how do we implement the OAI PMH use case in what is generic resource synchronization thing? So the DSpace one has been doing this. It's actually uncovered a lot of problems. So for example, DSpace does not timestamp an item, or sorry, it timestamps an item, it does not timestamp the parts of an item. So what that means is if you add a new file to an item you have in DSpace, we know it's been updated, but we don't actually know what's changed. We don't know if it was the metadata that was changed, or it was the file that was added, deleted, or removed. So actually by doing this, it's highlighted sort of issues in implementation, in a sense, in repositories, in that if they want to fully support things like ResourceSync efficiently, they have to potentially sort of do more. So yeah, there is a draft DSpace 1 ePrints when it's implemented. Yes. So you don't rather watching that. If we just go to the last slide, yeah, there's a load of links there. But if you just go to NICE or even just search ResourceSync, you'll find the spec. But if you've done sitemap implementation, which I presume ePrints has, it should be trivial.
I was just wondering if there was any way to, so it works between 2 web-based platforms, but is there any way to kind of port it? Is it that dependent on URLs that you can't sync it to a desktop app? Because you can imagine if we're talking about making things kind of no effort at all, if you had a folder on your computer that you save things in, and when you saved it there it said add a little metadata, and then it just pushed it onto your repository.
Call it a URI then instead, and yeah, you can obviously have URIs for files on your desktop, so yeah, nice. I'd imagine so, yeah. Thank you very much.
Nicola, do you want to take over?
So, that is the official bit of day 1 over, but now the unofficial, excellent, symplectic sponsored drinks take place. So for the next hour, there is various lovely stuff to drink. I think there are even nibbles. And we will, at some point, wave from the balcony on the stairs with the price of Petra once the votes are all counted. So thank you all for coming along today. We look forward to seeing you all tomorrow, and go forth and socialise, basically. Thank you.